मानुषी संवाद में आप सबका स्वागत है. Welcome to the 11th January 2023 edition of Manushi Samvad. Friends, today we have with us Mr. Kanwal Sibal, a very prominent public intellectual, and he's been an ambassador. We have published his CV. You can see an impressive CV. One of the foremost voices on foreign policy issues, but not just that. Also, he speaks and writes eloquently on internal issues as well. And I'm sure education is a subject close to his heart. तो सिबल साहब, आपका बहुत स्वागत है. आप पहली बार हमारे चैनल पे आए हैं. तो आप टॉपिक तो देख ही रहे हैं. इस पे आपने स्वयं भी ट्वीट किया था, जिसको देखकर मैंने आपको कहा कि कृपया इस पे आके बोलिए कि भारत सरकार जो विश्व गुरु बनने के सपने देख रही है या वो एस्पिरेशन लेके चली हुई है, वो कैसे ऐसी पॉलिसी अनाउंस कर सकती है जो फॉरेन यूनिवर्सिटीज को कहती है आइए प्लीज यहाँ पे कैंपसेस सेटअप कीजिए और हमारी शिक्षा का स्तर ऊपर उठाइए. अब इससे पहले कि आप जवाब दें, एक मैं उनकी पॉलिसी एनईपी में, नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 2020 जो है, उससे एक छोटा सा कोटेशन मैं पढ़ना चाहूंगी एंड देन यू कमेंट ऑन दैट. कि एक तरफ आप देखिए एनईपी क्या बताता है. फर्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज. या ये हमारी ज्ञान परंपरा को होमेज पे करते हुए एनईपी में लिखा गया है. The rich heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and thought has been a guiding light for this policy. The pursuit of knowledge, wisdom, and truth was always considered in Indian thought and philosophy as the highest human goal. The aim of education in ancient India was not just the acquisition of knowledge as preparation for life in this world or life beyond schooling, but for the complete realization and liberation of the self. Next slide. अब आप ये देखिए, वर्ल्ड क्लास इंस्टीट्यूशंस ऑफ एंशिएंट इंडिया सच एज तक्षशिला, नालंदा, विक्रमशिला, वल्लभी set the highest standards of multidisciplinary teaching and research and hosted scholars and students from across backgrounds and countries. The Indian education system produced great scholars such as Charaka, Shushruta, Aryabhatta, Varahamira, भास्कराचार्य, ब्रह्मगुप्ता, चाणक्य, चक्रपाणी, दत्ता, माधव, पाणिनि, पंतंजलि, नागार्जुन, गौतम, पिंगला, शंकरदेव, मैत्रेयी, गार्गी, तिरुवल्लुवर, among numerous others. अब आखिरी पेज पे ले जाइए, 13 पेज पे. इससे कैसे जोड़ते हैं? एनईपी क्या कहती है कि वो क्या करने जा रही थी? विजन ऑफ दिस पॉलिसी, ये 13th है. All right. This national education policy envisions an education system rooted in Indian ethos that contributes directly to transforming India, that is Bharat, sustainable into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high quality education to all and thereby making India a global knowledge superpower. अब ये मुझे बताइए कि ये जो क्यूरिकुलम सेटअप करेंगी फॉरेन यूनिवर्सिटीज, ये सुपर पावर ये हमें पाणिनि सिखाएंगी या क्या अभी तक सिबल साहब, लेट्स हैव यू ऑन द स्क्रीन. यू गॉट द सेंस कि क्या क्लेम क्या था न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी का? जो वो खुद करना था, वो ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज की ट्रेडिशन, जो ज्ञान परंपराओं को पुनर्जीवंत करना था, वो तो हुआ नहीं. Now they are expecting Yale, Oxford, Harvard to come and do that, or are they saying हमारे बस का नहीं है, तुम ही आके जो कर सकते हो कर लो?
Well, actually, if you look at what you read from the document, it's a challenge to our own system. We don't need to bring in foreign universities to upgrade the levels and productivity of our higher education. If we have this tradition, if we had these great universities, if we produced all these scholars in various domains domains which have been mentioned, mathematics, astronomy, grammar, what have you, then why can't we just delve into those traditions? And since we have the human resource available in this country, we are doing extremely well in so many areas, IT and this and that, in the digital economy. So we have the necessary uh, brain power, which we have inherited from our ancient traditions, to be able to produce remarkable results. So why can't we rely on ourselves and upgrade our education system ourselves rather than seeking to depend on foreign universities to come and upgrade our education system? There's an inherent contradiction in that. So I don't know what is the purpose and aim of this segment of the new education policy, because the NEP should focus essentially on improving our own higher education system through our own inputs. And where necessary, we need to tie up in some cooperative arrangements with foreign universities in terms of exchange of professors, exchange of faculties, or some kind of common degrees and this and that, without they having to establish their branches here. That can be done. That's part of globalization. After all, even our IT sector and other achievements that we can claim are as a result of international cooperation. So that can continue in even in higher education in various ways. If you want to set up, let's say, a top class business school, we have set up our IITs. These have been set up in collaboration with the foreign, with MIT, for instance. The first IIT was set up in collaboration with MIT. That kind of collaboration can go on. But the MIT has not set up an IIT in India, nor do they intend to, nor does Harvard. In fact, you may have seen from the papers I saw this morning, they have said they have no plans at all to establish any branches in India, and they haven't done so. Similarly, in terms of Oxford and others, they're not going to come in. So I don't know whether. Now, let me add something. Having worked in government, uh, I know that many of these things are discussed and thought through, and opinions taken, and then finally a policy is drawn up. So it's not as if this has been done blindly without extensive in-house discussions. And there are knowledgeable, sensible, experienced people who would have given their views and pointed out some of the things that I would point out, or you would point out, others would point out about the deficiencies in this approach. And these would have been considered, and nevertheless, they have come out with this policy. So, without trying to say that they have not given adequate thought to this, I suppose they have, but I don't think that what they have produced in terms of internal discussions is persuasive. I don't think what they seek to achieve, they'll be able to achieve. And not only that, my bigger problem is with something else, which is that we have certain trends in Western universities, especially American universities, which are causing immense problems even in Europe. I heard myself a few months ago President Macron saying that what is emerging from the American universities, like critical race theory and everything else, are alien to French culture. And he said that I would want our Minister of Education to see how these trends and these tendencies can be adequately dealt with so as not to create social problems in France. Now, if a European country has concerns about American universities and the kind of wokist ideas that are flourishing there, especially centered around the critical race theory, I think we need to worry much more, because in terms of where our own society stands, there's a huge gap between us and the West. And therefore, importing these ideas which do not fit into our social system is going to create a lot of problems. Already, a lot of problems have been created because we can't isolate ourselves, especially through social media. Our youngsters and others are constantly exposed to trends and thinking and fashionable thought, if you like, and modernist thought, if you like, and they imbibe those ideas very easily, very quickly, and then they spread through through their to the larger student community and the youth, and this gives them the impression that they are actually in line with the most advanced thinking everywhere in terms of social evolution and those kind of things. So we can't isolate ourselves. Uh, so that's understandable. But then to go a step beyond and invite all this ourselves and ask them to set up branches of the universities here where they can then expose a much larger number of our youth and our student community to all these very disruptive ideas which our society at this stage is not able to absorb and deal with, I think would be very counterproductive.
Mr. Sibal, I'm sure you've seen Rajiv Malhotra's book Snakes in the Ganga. और उस किताब में इतना बारीकी से डॉक्यूमेंट किया है राजीव मल्होत्रा ने, और वार्निंग बेल्स बजाए हैं. ये सेकंड है ब्रेकिंग इंडिया फोर्सेस की वॉल्यूम 2 है, स्नेक्स इन द गंगा. तो अभी तो ऐसा हो रहा है कि इन स्नेक्स को कहा जा रहा, आओ हमारी सभी यूनिवर्सिटीज को डस लो. इट्स एन ओपन इन्विटेशन फॉर द स्नेक्स टू कम एंड बाइट. अगर वहां बैठ के वो इतना नुकसान कर रहे हैं, और वैसे भी उनकी कोलैबोरेशंस तो चलती रहती हैं इंडियन यूनिवर्सिटीज के साथ, रिसर्च सेंटर्स के साथ, सिलेक्ट स्कॉलर्स के को कैसे वो प्रमोट करते हैं. ईच वन ऑफ देम टू द लास्ट मैन एंड वुमन हैज टर्न्ड आउट टू बी अ हिंदू बैशर, इंडिया बैशर. उनमें से आप बताइए एक भी निकला है जो वहां जाके इन आईवी लीग में जाके पढ़े हैं? Rarely do you find, very rare, that the person stays sane. Otherwise, it's brutal, almost compulsive addiction to Hindu bashing, India bashing. तो जब वहां से ये मास प्रोडक्शन ऑलरेडी हो रही है, अब आप कह रहे हो यहाँ पे भी आप अपनी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग यूनिट्स लगा लो देशद्रोही ताकतों के लिए. What sense does it make? और वो राजीव मल्होत्रा आए, इतने लोगों को किताब दी, लंबी लंबी डिस्कशंस की, सब कुछ हुआ, कोई वार्निंग लेने के बजाय उल्टी दिशा में. व्हाट्स हैपनिंग? ये पढ़ते लिखते नहीं है क्या सरकार में बैठ के?
Actually, just for your information, I launched this book at the
Yes,
Vivekananda National Foundation,
yes.
and I read it with great interest, and I seized the essence of it and spelt it out in my intervention when I launched the book. And it was an eye opener. Of course, I had read his earlier book, Breaking India. And more than that, I've been following what is happening in the West in terms of damaging our image, questioning our democracy, focusing on all the fissures in our society, exaggerating them. And as you rightly said, this whole business of bashing Hindutva, but actually behind that, in a sense, bashing Hinduism per se. And you have people like the lady Trushke, who is so vicious in what she writes and says. It's amazing. And we have a lot of students at the Rutgers University. When I was in Washington, there were some other issues relating to our students there, and I dealt with that. So we see what is happening in the American universities, in the humanity areas, which Rajiv Malhotra has brought out very well, and in fact has focused on Harvard as the epicenter of this. Because I asked him, I said, why are you singling out Harvard? Because the problem spans a lot of other universities too. He said he's doing that because Harvard has the reputation, has the status, has the stature, and it is, in a sense, emblematic of what is happening in American universities. And what they are really doing is that in this critical race theory, they are replacing the blacks with the Dalits, and the oppressors, the whites, with the Brahmins. And they're distorting the entire narrative and actually, in a sense, attacking the foundations of Hinduism. But in his book, he actually goes beyond that and speaks about the role of the World Economic Forum.
Yes.
Which in its own way is promoting the same agenda.
Yeah.
is promoting the same agenda. So basically, it is to shake the foundations of our society, and by shaking the foundations of our society, um, in fact, erode our self-confidence, especially all that talk that we have about we being a Vishvaguru and having a glorious past, and we want to build on that. They don't want that. They want us to become part of a consumer-oriented global society, which is then controlled by these forces, whether it is the intellectual forces from the Harvard or the economic forces from the World Economic Forum. And he expressed a lot of anguish that our big industrialists have actually been financing chairs in these universities, knowing fully well what they are up to, what they are up to. So it is a pity that we are not absorbing the message that he is sending. Now, I can understand that at the end of the day, we have to be a bit balanced in how we handle these things. After all, we can't isolate ourselves from the world or from the West. And there's so many areas from which we can benefit from the West, and which we are benefiting from the West. Yeah. We have also benefited from globalization. All the investment and everything else that is coming in, it helps us to modernize our society and build the sinews of our economic strength. So we can't turn our backs to the West, but we have to calibrate it in such a manner that we extract the best out of our cooperation with the West and try to build firewalls as much as we can to prevent the worst of their instincts and their policies from spilling over into our country. And I'm afraid if we open our education system, and I have a couple of other things to say on this, to the Western universities, we are actually in the process of, in a sense, eroding the basis of our own civilization, which will then affect us all round, including in terms of our foreign policy. Because if you're going to change the thinking of our youth, and in a sense make them part of a larger Western oriented thinking apparatus, then that will then spill over in all forms of policy making, including foreign policy. So we have to be very, very careful. Now, the thing is that when it comes to humanities, I think we have to be extremely careful that we don't allow these universities to come and set up courses or branches which are going to teach humanities to our students, because they'll bring in all these disruptive ideas, whether it is wokeism or LGBT or gender issues or stuff like that, which in a sense, we have to keep an open mind on these issues, but we don't have to go as far as they have gone in making them absolutely central to their social thinking.
नहीं, एक तो एज फार एज देव गॉन तो बहुत दूर की बात है, वहां पे भी उनकी विजडम काम नहीं कर रही, वो सोसाइटीज भी ब्रेक डाउन हो रही हैं. ऐसा नहीं है कि दे आर फ्लरिशिंग विद द विजडम दैट दे आर एक्चुअली मास एक्सपोर्टिंग टू अदर कंट्रीज. खुद के लिए भी नहीं संभाला जा रहा. आपने इन्वेस्टमेंट की बात की कि फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट्स, आई एम नॉट फॉर अ क्लोज्ड डोर इकोनॉमी वन बिट, बट फैक्ट इज भारत के जितने भी एंटरप्रेन्योर्स मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में हैं, वो वापस नहीं, ना तो चाइना से वापस आ रहे हैं, जिसने सिंगापुर में अपने ऑफिस खोल रखे हैं, दुबई में. मोस्ट ऑफ देम आर सेटिंग अप bases in Dubai, in Singapore, everywhere else. They are not returning. बताइए आप कितने वापस आए हैं वहां से इन्वेस्टमेंट ओपनिंग्स का फायदा लेने के लिए. अब फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट सीख करे जा रहे हैं, पर जो आपका खुद का इन्वेस्टर बेचारा भागा हुआ है यहाँ से तंग आके, उसको तो वापस ले आओ पहले.
Well, I think the picture is a little more mixed because you have some big industrialist entrepreneurs who are investing a great deal in Indian infrastructure uh, in all sorts of areas.
मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में नहीं हो रहा.
नहीं, उसमें भी हो रहा है. After all, if let's say in the renewable energy sector, there's a lot of investment that is going in. It is true that we buy our chips and all that for our solar panels and everything else from China because we haven't built up our domestic
तो फिर
capacities. But
अभी सूर्य भगवान की किरणें ले ली वहां से टेक्नोलॉजी लेके, तो कोई बहुत बड़ी ग्रेट अचीवमेंट नहीं है, नंबर वन। पर बाथरूम स्लीपर भी हमारे चाइना से आ रहे हैं। आप बताइए, ये पेन 2 रुपए का, या पेंसिल या इरेजर, हमारे बाथरूम स्लीपर, बाथरूम टाइल्स, बताइए कितने हैं जो यहाँ, सिंपल थिंग्स that are being manufactured here. People have
yeah,
not shifted the base back, I mean, their
yeah,
base from
you're
other
right. But
countries.
I
And even today, high
mm,
worth individuals are going out, setting up bases in Dubai, in Singapore। तो खैर बहुत वहाँ पे cluttered हो गया, मतलब it's over cluttered now, but Dubai and the Middle East countries, they are going there। यहाँ नहीं सेट अप कर पा रहे, यहाँ नहीं सरवाइव कर पा रहे, ये सभी रो रहे हैं। तो मुझे वो तो चलिए वो कहानी अलग है। सवाल ये है कि अगर ये यूनिवर्सिटीज खुलेआम हिंदू बैशिंग, हिंदू सिविलाइजेशन बैशिंग, डीमोनाइजेशन ऑफ इंडिया एंड हिंदूज, ये सब कर रहे हैं, हमें तो सबने फासिस्ट करार कर दिया। ये तो इनकी ग्रैंड यूनिवर्सिटीज, सो कॉल्ड लिबरल आर्ट यूनिवर्सिटीज, जो विक्टिम कम्युनिटी है उसी को फासिस्ट बोल रहे हैं। मेरा अगर बस चलता, मैं तो इन सबको ब्लैकलिस्ट कर देती कि इनसे पढ़ा इंसान हमारे देश में, इसको तो नौकरी नहीं मिलेगी,
mm,
क्योंकि वो बिल्कुल जहर भर रहे हैं हमारे नौजवानों में। और फिर क्योंकि हार्वर्ड से इंजेक्शन मिल रहे हैं वो विषैले, तो लोगों को लगता है कि हम बहुत स्मार्ट हो गए और आपका करियर प्रोस्पेक्ट बहुत ऊंचा चला गया। सो youngsters are falling in that trap easily, instead of blacklisting them, instead or handling them like China does. Rajiv Malhotra also discusses in detail how China handles these universities. It makes them serve the Chinese agenda, even though it's a very repressive agenda, very authoritarian. And in India, our Indian government cannot make these universities serve the agenda of a very plural, benign civilization which has never tyrannized or suppressed anybody. ये इनकॉम्पिटेंस ऑफ द हाईएस्ट ऑर्डर। फिर आप कह रहे हैं ठीक है तुम जहर पिलाते हो हमारे लोगों को, यहाँ और मास स्केल पे पिलाओ। अभी तो कुछ एलीट ही बच्चे जा पाते हैं, अभी और भी आ जाएंगे मिडिल क्लास के बच्चे भी आपके पास। जी।
see a couple of things. One is that our system is different. It's not an excuse, but since we are a democracy and a very liberal democracy, in some ways a chaotic democracy, so we don't have the instruments in our hands of the kind China has in terms of enforcing their will on foreign investors, whether in the education system or otherwise. You've seen how much they control this. They've in fact forced the foreign companies to have on their board a member from the Chinese Communist Party to keep control over them. So I don't think we can replicate the China model, but there is something else which is more significant, which is that much of this Hindu bashing and propaganda and fascism and everything else that we are accused of, the source of that is within our country. If you really look at it, who are the people who began all this? It happened after the BJP came to power after 2014, that this language of fascism and minority insecurities and Mussolini and Kristallnacht uh, and Hitler and stuff like that, it all began. And the fact that there's a backsliding of our democracy, there's lynching going on, the minorities are feeling insecure. All this talk has emanated from within the country, and this talk has emanated within the country from people who have a certain credibility abroad, whether they have served in international institutions in various capacities, political and economic, or they are writers or academics or reputed columnists, or they have been lecturing in those universities, they're writers. all these people who have credibility and from the Western point of view can't simply be dismissed as nobodies. So they have done a huge amount of harm to our own, and this includes the leftists, especially. Uh, so I think our own system is hugely responsible for the kind of problems that we are facing today. And in this, unfortunately, in some ways, the courts, our own courts, have been, in a sense, uh, I won't say complicit, but some of them have their own ideas, which are not too far away from the kind of leftist, wokist ideas that we see emerging from American universities. And since the other courts consider themselves as the last bastions of democracy in this country and preserving the rights of individual. So we have an issue there because whatever government may want to do or not want to do, the courts have ultimately decide what executive policy in some areas ought to be. So we have this internal problem that we have to attend to and resolve, and it's not going to be easy. One is that. The other is this polarization that we see in the United States, where, in fact, I am told by so many of my people that I know that you can say nothing against the minorities, nothing. And if you utter anything against the minorities, you will be socially ostracized. In all these big universities, uh, top class Ivy League universities, uh, the it is impossible to say anything which is goes against the current thinking with regard to these kind of wokist ideas. A friend of mine, I don't want to name him, uh, he has left one prestigious university to go somewhere else because he began to feel that in the current atmosphere in the United States, he, as a person of Indian origin, would find avenues for rising in the academic area blocked because the targeting of Hindus and Indians, uh, because there's a huge amount of sensitivity towards the blacks, but not to the Indians, because the Indians are seen as competitors. They are seen in some ways as even better than than the whites. So the blacks they can tolerate because they have a certain racist attitude towards them, even though they claim that they are being anti-racist in their thinking today. But the Indians are fast moving into an area where we can potentially have some difficulties with regard to this kind of bashing that is going on. The other, of course, is that uh, there is a lot of sensitivity towards Islam and the Islamic minorities and the whole thing about Islamophobia. But there is actually no concept of Hindu phobia. There are some elements in of Hindu society in United States who are trying to raise this issue of Hindu phobia, but it is not at the moment going very far in terms of receptivity. But there is a problem down the line where forces in India which want to destabilize the present government, uh, combining arms with elements abroad, which also include very sizable number of Indian origin academics and scholars and media people, to try and see how India can be contained. And the 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 objective ultimately would spell out in a sense curbing the rise of India by creating by deepening the internal fissures that already exist, by maligning our external image that we are no longer democratic and this and that, uh, and therefore we are not adhering to the larger consensus that has developed, promoted by the WEF, frankly, also
True.
in terms of environment, climate change, all the agenda that they have, which the industry must also subscribe to, in terms of metrics which they lay out. And only if they do that will they get loans and support and investment from foreign investors. So they are shaping the agenda in a very broad way, both on the social and economic side, which we have to be which we have to be vigilant about. And therefore, in that larger context, which we are becoming more and more aware of, To now talk about foreign universities opening branches in India, to my mind, seems a bit, how should I say, not in tune with what the country requires
Not only
today.
that, Mr. Sibal, forget what the country requires. चलिए मान लीजिए सरकार की कंसेप्शन में या उनकी इमेजिनेशन में ABCD है, ठीक है, तो वो बोल दीजिए आप हमें न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में पाणिनि और आर्यभट्ट और तक्षशिला और नालंदा के सपने दिखाते हैं। अरे नालंदा यूनिवर्सिटी की स्पिरिट को रिवाइव करना तो दूर है, एक टुच्चा सा टाइनी सा रिसर्च सेंटर भी उस दिशा में खोल देते जहां हमारी कम से कम संस्कृत भाषा में कटिंग एज रिसर्च हो सके। आज जिसको संस्कृत भी सीखनी होती है ना, वो शिकागो यूनिवर्सिटी जाते हैं, उनको लगता है BHU तो कुछ पढ़ाई वढ़ाई होती नहीं, वहां तो यूनियन बाजी होती है स्टूडेंट्स की, टीचर्स। वो यूनिवर्सिटी भी तबाह कर दी जो हिंदू इथोस को प्रिजर्व करने और उसको रिजुवनेट करने के लिए बनाई गई थी, उसका भी तबाही हो चुका है पूरी तरह से। अब एक नई इंस्टीट्यूशन तो खोली नहीं जो नालंदा की कम से कम स्पिरिट की पहचान कर ले। अभी जो बात कर रहे हैं ये पाणिनि, आर्यभट्ट, फलां ढिमका, आज हमारे पास कितने लोग हैं जो उन मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट्स को पढ़ने की क्षमता भी रखते हैं। आपने वो भी नहीं किया कि उन भाषाओं को आज हमारे बच्चे BA MA वाले ही नहीं स्टूडेंट्स, मैं कह रही हूँ कि PhD वाले, सिंस आई स्पेंट ऑल माय लाइफ इन एकेडेमिया, PhD वाले यूनिवर्सिटी प्रोफेसर्स 4-5 सेंटेंस करेक्ट किसी भाषा में लिखने की क्षमता नहीं रखते। ये बदहाली है हमारी यूनिवर्सिटीज की, एंड दैट इंक्लूड्स स्टूडेंट्स, PhD स्टूडेंट्स इन JNU who actually cannot write 10 correct sentences in English in which they are supposed to write their PhD. Things are so bad, leave alone smaller town universities. These are your elite universities, and there also you are producing linguistic cripples. Now if you're a linguistic cripple, you cannot possibly be a great intellectual who can play with ideas, explore new horizons. It's not possible because language is the primary instrument for acquisition of knowledge or search for knowledge. The point that I'm making is, on the one hand, we are facing a situation where your teachers, school teachers, many surveys have been done by government's own agencies which tell you that 12वीं क्लास का टीचर 6ठी कक्षा का इम्तिहान फेल हो रहा है बिहार में, यूपी में, वगैरह वगैरह। इतनी बदहाली है आपकी, वो तो ठीक करने की बात कोई सीरियसली ले नहीं रहा। और कुछ नहीं, भाषा का ज्ञान दे दो तो फिर कुछ भी पढ़ाया जा सकता। हमारे स्कूल ने क्या दिया मुझे, और कोई बहुत बड़ी ज्ञान परंपरा से वाकिफ नहीं कराया, सिर्फ ये कि पढ़ना लिखना, तो जो भी किताब उठाओ कुछ समझ आ जाती है। तो फिर सेल्फ एक्विजिशन तो कम से कम ज्ञान की हो सकती है। यहाँ तो वो हाल भी नहीं है। हमारे बच्चे पहले ये होता था गाइड बुक्स से पढ़ते थे, है ना, आप जानते हैं LLB के इम्तिहान भी वो दुखियां पढ़ के कर रहे हैं, वो ही फिर जज भी बन जाते हैं। अभी तो ये हालत है कि गाइड बुक भी समझने वाले बच्चे नहीं रहे कि उनको गाइड बुक में जो लिखा है, कुंजियों में जो लिखा है अंग्रेजी में, वो ही समझ आए। और हिंदी भी नहीं आती, मतलब ना मदर टंग आती है, ना हिंदी आती है, ना अंग्रेजी आती है। ये बदहाली है। और आप विश्व गुरु बनने चले हैं। मुझे समझ नहीं आता कि यहाँ से शुरू तो अभी तक किया नहीं, हायर एजुकेशन में डिटॉक्स हुआ नहीं, वहाँ अभी भी गेट कीपर्स वही हैं, वोक आइडियोलॉजी के कैरियर्स जो हार्वर्ड से पढ़ के आते हैं या कोलंबिया से पढ़ के आते हैं। दे आर द गेट कीपर्स इवन टुडे ऑफ द पब्लिशिंग इंडस्ट्री एंड as well as for all prize jobs in academia. I don't know what this government is. अगर आपकी नियत है कि हमारे बस का नहीं है उन्हीं को बुलाना, तो कह दीजिए ना, तो फिर हम स्वीकार कर लेंगे। हमें कम से कम भ्रम में तो मत डालिए। और क्योंकि आप विवेकानंद फाउंडेशन से हैं जिसका काम ही है पॉलिसी पे एडवाइस करना गवर्नमेंट को, दैट्स इट्स मैंडेट. डोंट दे लिसन टू यू?
Not really. I mean, let's not exaggerate the importance of the Vivekananda International Foundation. Uh, I mean, in a limited way, the foundation is doing what it is required to do, but broad policy making in a whole host of areas which the country needs is beyond the capacity of any think tank to advise the government on. But having said that, there are some other issues which I think need to be highlighted. Uh, and these have been discussed also recently in all the commentary that is coming out on this new initiative. One, of course, is that this whole idea of inviting foreign universities to set up branches in India is not new. This goes back to the UPA government. Uh, but, the project didn't materialize for a variety of reasons because there are very serious issues involved. At that time, one big issue was that the universities foreign universities which set up branches would not be profit-making institutions. That whatever they earn as revenue will be reinvested in upgrading their facilities, etc., etc. So this didn't work. Now in the new education policy, they're talking about allowing the profits, whatever the revenues, to be repatriated to the home country, which means that they'll come in on the basis not of a kind of a social service in terms of providing education, but in terms of a semi-commercial enterprise, which means therefore very high fees, because if they are going to repatriate their earnings, it has to be based on very high fees, which means that only a certain class of people in our country will be able to afford those fees, which means in addition to all those who would want to go to the parents institution because they would have the money to pay $60,000-$70,000 or whatever is needed they would still go, because they have some other ambition in mind, which is it is to actually find jobs and start working in that country, in those countries. But the others who are not able to afford this, that much money, would then seek admission to these branches, which also would mean that they would have to pay a lot more than they pay in admission to our own universities, which means we are going to create another class of privileged people in our country, which are exposed to Western style education.
नहीं, वो तो खैर अशोका यूनिवर्सिटी भी वही कर रही है. दैट अपार्ट, नाउ लेट्स फोकस ऑन their stated guidelines. How impractical, how fuzzy, how foggy the entire document is. अब आप देखिए, मान लीजिए ये सीरियस भी है कि आ जाएं तो शायद कंपटीशन में बाकी सुधर जाएं. होगा सिर्फ यही कि जो अच्छे टीचर अगर आ गए, जो आने वाले हैं नहीं, आई एम क्वाइट कन्विंस किसी ने आना वाना है नहीं, क्योंकि अभी रेगुलेशंस की बात पे आते हैं. परंतु अगर आ भी जाए तो यही होगा जैसे अशोका यूनिवर्सिटी ने किया, जो उनके क्रेम दला क्रेम DU के हैं, JNU के हैं, प्रेसिडेंसी के हैं, फला, उनको बुला लिया. यहाँ 2 लाख कमाते थे, वहाँ 5 लाख 6 लाख तनख्वाह दे दी, तो यहाँ से ही सारा साइफन करेंगे. तो ये यूनिवर्सिटीज भी यही करेंगी, तो जो बची कुची हैं वो कोलैप्स हो जाए. चलिए अच्छा है, मैं तो सोचती हूँ ये सिस्टम कोलैप्स होता दिखना चाहिए. जो बुरी हालत है, जो हम फेस करने को तैयार नहीं है, somebody connected to the teaching profession, I feel terribly depressed at the state of things, because I deal with young students every day who are not capable of even reading a newspaper, simple news item, to make sense of it. चलिए अब guidelines देखिए क्या fuzziness है. The regulations demand that the quality of education and the value of the degree should be at par with those of the parent institution. But ये UGC कैसे करेगी? नंबर 1 कि अच्छी यूनिवर्सिटी बिना रिसर्च में खूब पैसा लगाए अच्छी यूनिवर्सिटी हो नहीं सकती. Best universities are those that promote a lot of research, even if it's phony research like Harvard, but the pretense is very, fancy. Now the point is, रिसर्च तो पे नहीं करता है, रिसर्च तो अंधा कुआं है, वहां डालना पड़ता है, तो प्रॉफिट इतनी आसानी से बनते भी नहीं है। दूसरा, यहाँ पे यूजीसी कैसे इंश्योर करेगी कि हार्वर्ड जैसा वहां पे अच्छे फैकल्टी है वो यहाँ पे हो? क्या उन प्रोफेसर्स को या उन जैसों को हार्वर्ड के कॉम्परेबल सैलरी मिलेगी या उससे बेहतर मिलेगी? क्योंकि इंडिया में आके रहना एक अमेरिकन के लिए कोई बहुत आसान बहुतों को नहीं लगता। यहाँ की हवाई इतनी दूषित हो जाती है, लोग बीमार पड़ जाते हैं, पानी ये वो। दूसरा, ये कह रहे हैं न्यू एंट्रेंट्स वुड बी ग्रांटेड ऑटोनॉमी इन द क्रूशियल एरियाज ऑफ एडमिशन प्रोसेस एंड फी स्ट्रक्चर्स, ऑल्दो द लैटर मस्ट बी कोट अनकोट ट्रांसपेरेंट एंड रीजनेबल। भी ट्रांसपेरेंट और रीजनेबल किसको कहते हैं? हाउ डू यू डिफाइन रीजनेबल? रीजनेबल फ्रॉम हुज व्यू पॉइंट? फ्रॉम द व्यू पॉइंट ऑफ अ कॉर्पोरेट honcho और अ बैंक क्लर्क? क्या होगा इसमें? प्रोसेस, फी स्ट्रक्चर किसके पॉकेट में सूट करने के लिए उनको अपने फी स्ट्रक्चर को ट्यून इन करना पड़ेगा? बिकॉज रीजनेबलनेस इज अ वेरी सब्जेक्टिव एंड अ वेरी फजी फ्रेज। दूसरा, in spite of sounding strict in the draft, the UGC undermines its own authority by giving overseas institutions a free hand in so many aspects. तो आप एक तरफ उनको फ्री हैंड दे रहे हो, उतना फ्री हैंड जो लोकल यूनिवर्सिटीज को नहीं है। दूसरी तरफ आप कह रहे हो ये होगा, रीजनेबल होगा, स्टैंडर्ड वही होगा। इनसे अपने प्राइमरी स्कूल का स्टैंडर्ड तो मेंटेन हो नहीं रहा भारत की सरकार से कहीं पे भी। ये फॉरेन यूनिवर्सिटीज का स्टैंडर्ड देखेंगे कि जो ऑक्सफोर्ड जैसी वहां है वैसी ही स्टैंडर्ड की यहाँ हो। मतलब ये क्या छलावा है? किसको फूल कर रहे हैं, किसको छल रहे हैं? स्वयं के अलावा किसको? क्या भारत की जनता क्या केवल नारों पे प्रफुल्लित हो जाती है? तो ठीक है जी, अरे फॉरेन यूनिवर्सिटीज आएंगी, मेरा बच्चा भी हार्वर्ड की डिग्री ले लेगा। वहाँ 1 करोड़ लगता है, यहाँ शायद 10, 12, 15 लाख में हो जाए। I mean, is that what they are counting on? That the mal-educated Indian will be delighted without taking into consideration the ground reality?
Well, these are early stages. I think there'll be a lot of difficulties ahead. And the best guess, as you have said, is that the top class universities will not come. And if the second tier universities come, then it doesn't serve our purpose. And the second tier universities will not bring in the best professors and have the kind of standards that the NEP is talking about. So I agree with you that these are very generic kind of guidelines that have been drafted, but there are a lot of pitfalls ahead, and the implementation of these guidelines is going to be extremely difficult. Now, the best one can say is that the government has expressed its willingness and its intention to open up the higher education sector to foreign investment, to foreign universities, as part of the opening up of India, to derive whatever advantage it can derive in terms of international messaging. But whether, after all, we are doing ease of doing business, we want more and more investment.
Ease of doing business हुआ सर जी, नहीं हुआ।
No, what I'm saying is that, why are we doing this in terms of attracting more and more investment, but we are not able to attract the kind of investment that we are hoping for, simply because you are expressing your intention to open up your economy and make it more attractive doesn't necessarily mean that it'll meet up to the expectations of those who want to invest. You can't force anybody to invest. They have to then assess whether the situation in the country, the infrastructure and everything else is attractive enough for them to sink in money. In some areas they will, in some other areas they won't. So what I mean is that we are not the masters. Even if you have a policy, we are not the masters in terms of forcing the foreign investors or those who are coming in from abroad to do what we expect them to do. So we have to wait and see what happens. But I entirely agree with you that this is not going to happen in the foreseeable future, and the task really lies here in India to improve what you have just mentioned: primary education, secondary education, college level education, before we aspire to reach the highest international standards in terms of higher education. Actually, it is a very organic thing. You can't have a system of education where you rightly pointed out, which is so deficient in so many areas, and then you want it to be topped by a world class system, which will then attract people from outside. It's not workable. It's, if your other elements of other your primary, secondary, and other educational education system was performing very well and was throwing up students who were uh, meritorious, who were at a level where they should be in terms of their stage of learning and everything else, I can understand that then you can have aspirations for your higher education. But you can't have this unless the whole intention is to cater only to a small segment of our society, the already privileged ones, which is not the purpose of this government. Because if we are talking about inclusiveness, then inclusiveness also has to be reflected in our educational policies. Uh, so there again is a bit of a contradiction there. But but on the whole, I agree with you that there are a lot of flaws in this policy. There are a lot of pitfalls. We're not going to be able to achieve what we think.
It's
Uh,
madness. I mean, outright madness. आपके पास ऑड्रे टुश्के की पूरी फौज आ जाएगी अगर वो आ गए.
but let me
हालांकि
make a
वो
point
होते
here.
नहीं
Let me make a point here.
है.
I think in terms of STEM courses, where humanities are not involved, we can actually do whatever we want to do, and it'll be helpful. It'll be helpful, but we must keep the humanities out, absolutely out, because
आपको
that's where the problem is. And all, and in fact all the things that we are talking about in terms of destabilizing our society, uh, with the participants of people at home and people abroad, we'll be actually aggravating that problem for ourselves. Let me tell you something interesting.
जी.
One friend of mine who's a top level professor in a very prestigious university tells me that in his class, on the STEM side, 80% 80% of the students are Asian,
Yes.
and only 20% are white Americans. But when he attends seminars and everything else, or whatever it is on the international relations side, uh, uh, actually almost all of them, virtually 99%, are white Americans. And when he attends that, he is the only Asian. So this is what is happening in education in the United States itself.
Yeah.
Uh, so therefore, I think let's concentrate on STEM. Let's leave the humanities out. Let's protect ourselves from all these ideas that are emanating from the West, which are creating. Look, in terms of my own foreign policy background, I've been listening to what President Putin has been saying on this issue. And he's been making the point that there is now a huge gap. Now he's talking about as a European with a great history in terms of European civilization, that there is a huge gap that has developed between the West and the Slavic civilization, because all these woke ideas which he has spelled out are alien to even the Slavic civilization, which is actually European civilization. So you can imagine the problem that it creates for us, how much alien it would be for us to get these universities to come and expose our students to all these ideas, which are actually causing such huge problems in Western society and leading to the kind of polarization that we see in those societies.
मिस्टर सिबल, एक तो वोकिज्म को सिविलाइजेशन कहना या सिविलाइजेशन का इज रॉन्ग, because it's actually aiming at breakdown of society. Its open
Postmodern.
agenda
Yeah,
is breakdown of
postmodern.
family.
It's postmodern.
पोस्टमॉडर्निज्म ये सारी जो इजम्स हैं ये
Hmm.
समाज को तोड़ने वाली इजम्स है, नंबर वन. सेकेंडली, the second important point, you a lot of people think कि साइंस स्ट्रीम टेक्नोलॉजी में तो न्यूट्रल रहता है. कभी एक तो वो रहा नहीं. दूसरा, कोवैक्सिन और कोविड का जो बड़ा ग्लोबल स्कैम है, ये जो ग्लोबलिस्ट एजेंडा ऑफ पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल, फर्टिलिटी कंट्रोल, और आप बताइए कितने अभी एक्सपोजर्स आ रहे हैं. इसके बाद वेस्टर्न साइंस को कौन मानेगा? इनका फार्मा इंडस्ट्री ही सबसे बड़ा रोग, कॉर्पोरेट रोग पावर के रूप में इमर्ज किया है. इट्स एक्चुअली out to destroy the health of people. It's causing deaths, I mean mass murders literally. इसके बाद इनकी साइंस को कैसे ट्रस्ट कर लेंगे हम? मुझे नहीं लगता है कि साइंस इतनी इनकी न्यूट्रल है, because their science is also so destructive. We trusted their methods of agriculture and we poisoned our soils. We trusted their medical science, and look at where we are today. We've never had more health problems, not just in India, but globally, what they are doing to their own health, because all the chemicals that they are pumping, the pharma industry. You look at each field and you can see how much damage this science driven industrial revolution has done to the globe. We are nearing extinction इनकी साइंस के आधार पे. तो मुझे नहीं लगता वो भी इतनी न्यू. अब ऑर्गेनिक का अभी अमेरिका से अकल ज्ञान लेके आते हैं यहाँ पे. पहले यहाँ तबाही की उस एग्रीकल्चर की, आयुर्वेद की तबाही की. अब वो हर्बलिस्ट बनने जा रहे हैं. अब WHO आ जाता है हमारे आयुर्वेद की इंस्टीट्यूशंस को हेड करने, उसको कंट्रोल करने. आई रियली थिंक वी नीड टू कीप देम आउट. दे आर प्रेडेटरी बाय इंस्टिंक्ट. DNA प्रेडेटरी है, और ये कहने की हिम्मत हमें आनी पड़ेगी. जिस तरह तबाही की है आयुर्वेद की, इवन ड्यूरिंग कोविड, सबको मालूम है कि थे आयुर्वेद के क्योर्स, बड़े सिंपल, और इन्होंने क्या हाल किया, सबको ठोके ये वैक्सीन्स. नाउ it's all unraveling in the West. People are still afraid to talk about it here. But the fact is, let's not even trust their science. हमारे पास जो साइंस है, अपना आधार भूत रही है हमारी सिविलाइजेशन की, तो आधार ही साइंस है. Veda is all about science in trying to understand the nature of the cosmic universe. It's all about science. हजारों साल से यही करते आए हैं हमारे ऋषि. इनसे क्या सीखे? इतना predatory है, इतना destructive है, इतना aggressive है, that I really think we need to rethink our relationship to the Western predatory and destructive knowledge traditions.
I think, I mean, you've given one side of the picture, but there are other sides to the picture too, where I think it may not be right to sort of dismiss all the achievements, technological, scientific, and others of the West. Now, it is true that the kind of consumerism and society they have built on the basis of satisfying all the demands and aspirations of the individual, and then of course the whole machine of the corporate machine, which is profit oriented, which is all focused on the best possible return for their shareholders and everything else, that is creating its own distortions in terms of lifestyles, in terms of how society is organized. All these are things that are being reflected upon. The only thing is that is it at all feasible, possible, practical to opt out of this system without a huge crisis enveloping your own country? Because It's simply not possible to break the kind of links that now exist in every area. Now you just take this internet that we are using, which was developed by the U.S. military, by the Pentagon for the
This is
control of.
one of the great achievements. I am fully in support of it. This is one of the best things
Yeah.
they ever did. But यहाँ पे भी कितनी censorship ला रहे हैं, कितना तंग कर
True,
रहे हैं.
true. What I
But
meant
still,
is,
but
hmm,
still, it is truly something. I'm grateful to Google Uncle. I'm grateful to the internet. This is a technology that has really given humanity something worthwhile. Other than that, I'm I've become very pessimistic about the actual impact. It sounds very grand, but the impact of their technologies on most domains of life, especially long term impact, is so disastrous. They haven't yet found a cure for any medicine, any illness, but they pump you with 16 vaccines at birth. In Europe, that's what they are doing. आपकी सारा इम्यून सिस्टम खराब कर रहे हैं इनकी सारी दवाइयाँ. अम, थोड़ी सी प्रॉब्लम है आपकी किडनी में तो लिवर डैमेज साथ में कर देंगे. I, I mean, it's honestly, and they don't care.
but Madhu, look at the whole issue of polio, the eradication of polio, uh, or
वो कभी
eradication
फिर बात करेंगे. There are opinions on that,
of
and
smallpox. Then so many advances that have been made in surgery, heart surgery, this and that. Yes, there are downsides, but there are also great achievements. Uh, look at the longevity of life. I mean, when we became independent, what was it,
no, no,
27 or so?
independent. We had 1,000 years of brutalization, so our lifespan. But if you think of
No,
our
even in
pre
Europe, even in Europe, in
Europe,
two
always they had
is back.
such bad health habits, इतनी फूड हैबिट्स खराब, हाइजीन का नाम पता नहीं, ब्रश करने आते नहीं थे, नहाना इनको आता नहीं था. आई मीन ऑब्वियसली दे वुड डाई यंग. बट हमारे यहाँ जो चार आश्रम बताते हैं 100 साल की उम्र की कॉन्सेप्शन भी, यू नो, इफ यू लुक एट आयुर्वेद एंड योग एंड दैट होल लाइफस्टाइल, उसमें कैसे हो सकती थी. और पानी साफ था, आप अपने नदियों को तालाबों को मैला नहीं होने देते थे. अब ये मॉडर्न इनका स्यूएज सिस्टम लाए हैं, अपना सारा टॉयलेट फ्लश करके हम अपनी नदियों में फेंक रहे हैं. ये तो इनकी वेस्टर्न साइंस से सीखा ना. कभी 500 साल पहले कोई सोच भी सकता था, 400 साल पहले, कि हम अपना गंदा घर का मैला शिट अपनी गंगा माँ के पानी में डालेंगे और फिर वो कहते हैं इसको एसटीपी से क्लीन करो. इज इट गोइंग टू बी गंगा वाटर एवर अगेन इफ यू हैव poured industrial waste, noxious chemicals, and your shit into the sacred rivers which we used to worship.
But
So,
the point is, then you don't have urbanization. Then you go into much deeper questions about evolution of society, whether urbanization is a good thing or a bad thing, whether one should go back to the Gandhian way of
but we
organizing.
had the oldest city in the world, Akashi. इससे पहले कहाँ था इतना बड़ा कोई मतलब प्रॉपर
Yeah,
शहर.
but look,
इंद्रप्रस्थ ये शहर ही थे सर.
but look at the population growth that has happened since then, and that population growth puts a lot of pressure on everything, on all resources, including your rivers and your land and everything else. So, I mean, there are no simple answers to
Yeah,
the
there are no
entire
simple
problem
answers.
of human existence. Frankly, there are good things that happen, and alongside there are
Yes.
bad things that happen, and nobody has the right answer, frankly, and nobody will ever have the right answer. Uh, you'll always be groping for some kind of a balance, and this balance is also not easy to achieve because you see the Western society, how is it advanced in a particular direction, and now is generating huge issues within their own societies, which they are finding very difficult to cope with. Now, we want to develop our societies, but the tools that we need and the support that we need comes from ideas and material uh, inputs that have been developed or are coming from the West. So there again,
They're not working, sir. They're not working.
turn your back and say that,
उनकी
look,
अपनी इकोनॉमी कोलैप्स हो रही है because it was predatory. यूरोप ने जब से कॉलोनीज खत्म हुई, अब इंग्लैंड का देख लेना, अगले 20-30 साल में इनका क्या इकोनॉमिक जीनियस कैसे काम करने वाला है। तो खैर वो बात फिर कभी करेंगे, अभी ना हम कुछ ले लेते हैं सुपर चैट्स। माई ओनली पॉइंट इज सर दिस, जहां अच्छी चीज सही में है, where you actually see the impact being healthy, even from their viewpoint, by all means. But in most domains, they have messed up tragically, and we need to understand. और अब हमें environmentalism सिखा रहे हैं, उनसे अकल लेना मेरे लिए तो अब बहुत मुश्किल हो गया है सर। एनीवे ये तो सिर्फ भारद्वाज जी, थैंक यू फॉर योर सपोर्ट। एनी सुपर चैट क्वेश्चंस फॉर मिस्टर सिबल? यू राइट, देयर नो इजी आंसर्स सर। मोहित कह रहे हैं बीजेपी एज अ पॉलिटिकल पार्टी समटाइम्स लुक्स कंफ्यूज्ड एंड ऑलवेज लुकिंग फॉर फॉरेनर्स अप्रूवल। बीजेपी फॉरगॉट डिसमेंटलिंग ग्लोबल हिंदुत्व ऑर्गेनाइज्ड बाय whom? क्या कहेंगे आप इनको, मोहित को?
Well, as I said, this dismantling Hindutva and all that, it is the product of our own people. And I saw the list of the people who are promoting this. They're largely our own people. So the problem is at home. The point is that here, what they do does not have that kind of international coverage. If they hold it in the United States with the top universities are involved, or at least their names are involved, then it gets international coverage. And so their agenda gets the kind of mileage that they actually want. Since they can't combat the BJP here politically, so they would want to undermine the BJP externally by joining forces with the anti-Indian forces, which have always been there abroad, though of course there are friends of India abroad too. So it's not a simple picture, but there are a lot of elements abroad which are unhappy with this government, either over conversions or curbs over Christian charities or whatever. They have their own agendas, and they're unhappy with India, and therefore they join in this. They join hands with our own local forces in order to create problems for us. So I think there are efforts. There is the Hindu Foundation that in the United States, I understand, that is trying to combat all this. But a lot more effort, organizational effort, is needed to combat these forces. But unfortunately, as I said, moment you begin to defend this present government, you may defend this, and you want to defend this government not because you are wedded to their ideology, but because you believe in your own country. You are then immediately, called bhakts or smeared with epithets like being a fascist or Hindutva ideologues and this and that. It's very unfortunate. Our societies also, in some ways, have got politically polarized, and that is a very unhappy situation.
ये तो बात आपकी सही है, पर ये जो है मोदी बैशिंग, बीजेपी बैशिंग, एक्चुअली वो तो बहाना है। असली तो हिंदू सिविलाइजेशन को डेसिमेट करना है, और इसके पीछे आप जानते हैं वहाँ की कन्वर्जन माफिया यूएस का यूनिवर्सिटीज में बहुत अग्रेसिव रोल प्ले करता है। जो आप कह रहे हैं ना, हमारे लोग वो पपेट्स यहाँ से ले जाते हैं वहाँ पे, और अच्छे भले लोग जाते हैं और विषैले सांप बन जाते हैं, जैसे राजीव मल्होत्रा ने बहुतों को नेम भी किया अपनी किताब में। द पॉइंट इज वी नीड टू actually be able to negotiate. If we need the West, they need us actually more than we need them. And since they need us quite a bit for many things, including as a market, I see no reason why our government cannot negotiate with them कि ये आपकी लक्ष्मण रेखा है। ये लिबरलिज्म के नाम पे, फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन के नाम पे आप एक पूरी सिविलाइजेशन को डिफेम नहीं कर सकते. और
But
there's no, you blacklist them if they continue behaving like that.
you see the Western media, whether New York Times or Washington Post or Financial Times or Wall Street Journal or Economist or Independent. They are so negative about India, and it's not since
Because
yesterday.
हम जूते खाने के आदी हैं. If we
They-
learn to punch them in the nose, they wouldn't. अब देखो मेरी एक छोटी सी उदाहरण. आप you know much more about foreign policy. This tiny Burma ejected Rohingyas because they saw them as a very destructive force, genocidal force. उन्होंने कर दिया, कोई उनकी जान नहीं खा रहा. हमने अगर कहा कि यहाँ नहीं, आप वहां जाओ जहां से आप बिलोंग करते हो. बांग्लादेश उनको रिफ्यूज करता है, उसको कोई गाली नहीं देता. वी बिकम द बैड गाइज, इवन दो वी एवरीबडी नोज ये डेमोग्राफिक इन्वेजन का हिस्सा है, ये टेरर नेटवर्क्स को स्ट्रेंथन करने का हिस्सा है, इनको आर्मी बेसिस के आसपास बिठाया जा रहा है. तो सवाल है, हम इतने वीक नीड हैं तो फिर जूता कोई भी मारेगा ना.
because we are divided internally.
नो नो,
And
सरकार नीड्स टू डिफेंड इट्स ओन. इज्जत नहीं करती हैं.
we look at this Citizenship Amendment Act, which makes a lot of sense, but we've not been able to implement it
तो
because
क्यों
there's
क्यों क्यों शाहीन बाग को
both,
वाटर
both in
कैनन से उठा देते वहां पे जब ये बैठी थी आंटियां सारी, और कुछ नहीं, यू नो, अ हर्ड ऑफ पिग्स कुड हैव बीन लेट लूज, भग लेते वो. क्यों पूरा साल उनको सारे शहर को पैरालाइज करने दिया. एंड इट इज अ ड्रेस रिहर्सल फॉर फर्दर सिंगू बॉर्डर. अब ये सारे
police,
देश को कर सकते हैं.
the court said that they have a right to protest. See, our courts are very difficult to handle. So what do we do? Either we have a democracy or we don't have it.
नो सर, अगर बैठने ना देते पहले दिन हाईवे पे, मैं हाईवे पे बैठ जाऊं, पुलिस 10 मिनट में, हमारे 50 भी लोग होंगे, डंडे मार के निकाल देंगे. एक दिन ना बैठने देते. यूपी में योगी ने नहीं बैठने दिया तो नहीं हुआ. एक दिन भी नहीं बैठने देते. टेंट कैसे लगा सकते हो आप हाईवे पे? हाईवे पे आपने बैठने दिया, वहां पे अपना उनका तांडव करने दिया. सो आई थिंक इट्स वीक नीड responses which result in people then spitting on our face because we are so desperate to meet with their approval, to seek their approval. जिस दिन वो छोड़ दी मोहताजी, तो मुझे लगता है उस दिन सही में भारत की सरकार हमारी अपनी सरकार होगी. सो लॉन्ग एज वी कीप लुकिंग फॉर अप्रूवल फ्रॉम हॉस्टाइल फोर्सेस जिनका ओपन एजेंडा हमें तोड़ना, आई सी नो रीजन व्हाई वी शुड बी सो वीक नीड.
I think in many ways this government is showing its muscle also. What we've done in Kashmir, abrogating Article 370, um, actually declaring, separating Ladakh, taking some strong action against Pakistan. So we are, but then, problem is that we have these internal fissures. We have 200 million Muslims in the country. There is the feeling that at the end of the day, we have to manage the situation in a way that our internal problems don't get aggravated. There are this pan-Islamism. They have links with external lobbies. We have to function in a integrated world. We have, so much of our interests are involved in the Gulf. In terms of remittances and manpower and energy and everything else. So you have to balance a lot of things.
बैलेंसिंग हो नहीं रही सर.
And then,
बैलेंसिंग नहीं हो रही. बैलेंसिंग नहीं हो रही. और अगर बैलेंसिंग हो रही होती, कोई भी दुनिया का देश ये नहीं कह सकता कि लॉ ऑफ द लैंड मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी पे अप्लाई नहीं करेगा. वो कहीं भी हाईवे रोक दे, वो दंगा कर दें, कुछ कर दें, आगजनी कर दें और खुलेआम ऐलान कर दे कि हमारे लिए कोई कानून नहीं, कोई कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन नहीं, कोई अदालत नहीं, हम मजहबी हैं बस. कोई देश
Well, interestingly, in this context, you're mentioning this. Look at what's happening in Great Britain.
वो तो पागल हैं. I'm very
On the,
happy they are going to
on the same,
collapse.
on the
अरे
same issue.
Islamization of Great Britain is a delightful proposition. उनका वही हशर होना चाहिए जो वो हमारा 1947 में करके गए. So I look forward to the day ISIS flag जब उनकी पार्लियामेंट पे फ्लाई करेगा और जो उनके
Madhu is not only that. Look at Sweden. I saw
अगर वो
when there was,
पागल हैं तो
when there was
उनको
a
पता
writing.
नहीं है ना.
I think when there was a writing a few months ago, the Swedish Prime Minister said that I'm amazed. It seems as if we have two parallel societies in our country, and this is and this is there in Scandinavian countries. In France, look at what has happened in these democracies. They're finding it very difficult to handle these problems with democratic means. In China, you can deal with these.
डेमोक्रेसी को गुड बाय
People
करना
the way
पड़ेगा
they
ना जी.
want to.
डेमोक्रेसी cannot handle Islam.
Democracy is
Islam subverts all democracies. It sabotages, it takes over all vital institutions as soon as it enters because it's very clear its agenda is globalist. So democracy is incapable, either American or British or French or German, in handling it. So why not accept that harsh truth? और डेमोक्रेसी है भी तो क्या डेमोक्रेसी जी. मुझे अपनी वोट की कभी कोई कीमत नहीं लगी. I really think it's a useless instrument as far as
there's one statistic that we must not forget.
जी.
Very often we say we are the second or the third largest Muslim country in the world. America has a few millions, Europe has a few millions. In terms of numbers, they're pretty small. But we have not only a very large population of Muslim origin, there is a whole
हम
history of
बढ़ाए जा रहे हैं ना.
there is the whole Pakistan next door issue of terrorism, and then our democratic system, our federal system, large parts of our political class are wedded to a certain ideology of secularism, which will they'll beat the government with that with that weapon they have in their hands. It's very difficult governing India. I really sympathize with whoever the powers in this country are. It's very difficult to govern India. You really don't know where should be the balance between openness, inclusiveness, tolerance, and strong arm decisions. And
These
strong arm.
pious words mean nothing, sir, when you're dealing with mass murderers. Tolerance, you want to be tolerant towards mass murderers, genocidal forces? No. Or liberal inclusive, you want to be inclusive towards those जिनका खुला एजेंडा है इस देश को टुकड़े टुकड़े करना, इस्लामीकरण करना, क्रिश्चियनाइज करना. कैसे आप क्यों टॉलरेंट होंगे? नहीं होना है मुझे.
But the courts give this,
At
but the courts give bail very easily to some of these
अरे
fellows.
कोर्ट्स को भी अगर आप देखें, वी हैव अ वेरी कॉम्प्रोमाइज्ड जुडिशरी और आप खरीद सकते हैं जजेस बड़े आसानी से. ये खुल के आरोप लग चुके हैं सुप्रीम कोर्ट तक में. जब आपका सिस्टम इतना रॉटन है तो कुछ दिन कोर्ट्स को छुट्टी पे भेज दो, क्योंकि वो पहले अपना सिस्टम सुधारे. इतना बैकलॉग है. आप बताइए, 30 साल वेट कर रहे हैं लोग, ड्रैग होता जा रहा है केस. तो ऐसी कोर्ट से कहीं बेहतर है कि लोग अपनी अपनी पुरानी पंचायतों के पास झगड़े निपटा लें. और मैं तो आई वुड एनी डे प्रेफर, जहां भी वो बिरादरी पंचायत होती थी, मैं तो खाप पंचायत को भी आई ट्रस्ट इट मच मोर देन आर रेगुलर कोर्ट्स, क्योंकि दे नो समाज में क्या चल सकता है क्या नहीं. इनको पता ही नहीं, दे आर क्लूलेस एक्चुअली मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम. और इनका एजेंडा भी कहाँ से आता है और कितना मनी पावर प्ले करता है, कितने पॉलिटिकल प्रेशर्स प्ले करते हैं. सो कोर्ट्स के हवाला दे के अगर हम इस देश को उनके हवाले छोड़ेंगे, उनसे डर के, then we are finished. The institution is not working. The judiciary is not working.
Yeah, but
And
we have
dysfunctional institutions constitution.
The point is, we have given ourselves this constitution. We have given ourselves these principles on which our society is founded. We have given institutions
We
to
didn't,
ourselves.
sir, वो दे गए थे अंग्रेज, वही चल रही है।
Point is that
सर हमने नहीं किया।
if either you have a revolution or you try and deal with certain inherited issues, certain social fractures, certain problems on the ground which are not easy to resolve. The fact that you have to keep this union of India together, because there are parts of India which have people and leadership which is not entirely unison with the people in the rest of the country. And then we are so diverse in terms of our ethnicities, in religion, culture.
नहीं जी, आज सिर्फ 2 ही फॉल्ट लाइन्स हैं सर। लेट्स
Mm.
नॉट have any illusion about it. It's Christian. The moment a caste, jati group becomes Christian, वहां शुरू हो जाती है तुरंत इंसर्जेंसी। ये बहुत क्लियर है, जहां इस्लाम घुसता है वहां तोड़फोड़ शुरू हो जाती है, और ये जातियों को भड़काना आपस में, ये तो डेमोक्रेटिक पॉलिटिक्स की देन है कि पिच वन कास्ट अगेंस्ट द अदर। हजारों साल तक ये जातियां आराम से रही एक दूसरे के साथ, किसी ने किसी का जेनोसाइड नहीं किया। जैसे ही डेमोक्रेसी आती है सब एक दूसरे के खून के प्यासे बन जाते हैं। बट मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट ऑफ ऑल, आई डोंट थिंक वी कैन सॉर्ट आउट दिस इशू in one go, but my request to you, sir, is you have a powerful voice and you are positioned in an institution, उसकी है access. प्लीज सरकार को समझाइए, ये मत करें, ये नुकसानदायक है इन्हीं के लिए। सबसे ज्यादा बीजेपी और मोदी जी को।
That part I agree with you. I think this is not a wise step. We are not ready for this yet. We must first clean up our own act before we have these kind of visions of opening our higher education system. And in any case, even if we were to open it, we should not allow branches to be set up so that they have wide and easy access to large parts of our youth. There can be some kind of cooperative things, and there are people, educationists, who have outlined what can be done without opening campuses and at the same time improving the quality of our education in terms of faculty exchanges and programs, common programs, and stuff like that. These are the kind of things that we should look for rather than opening the doors to branches, especially for humanities, which should be a no-go area.
बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं आप। और ये जो कह रहे हैं हमारी यूनिवर्सिटीज को इम्प्रूव करें, अरे और कुछ नहीं, मदर टंग में एजुकेशन शुरू कर दें। अच्छी हिंदी, मराठी, तमिल लोग पढ़ना लिखना सीख दें। संस्कृत को कम से कम रिवाइव कर दें। वो पाणिनि की बात करते हैं, कौटिल्य की बात करते हैं, वो ही पढ़ाना शुरू कर दें। रामायणी अगर हमारे बच्चे पढ़ लेंगे तो लिंग्विस्टिक क्रिपल्स तो नहीं रहेंगे जी।
I agree with you.
है ना, तो वो ही कर दिया बहुत है। तो थैंक यू सो वेरी मच फॉर योर टाइम एंड you've been very patient with my impatient questions.
Thank you very
I
much.
really appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I always read you with interest and
Thank
you
you.
always are very insightful, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
शुभ
Bye-bye.
रात्रि।
Good night. Shubh Ratri.
गुड नाइट और
Good night.
नमस्कार व्यूअर्स।
नमस्कार।
कृपया लाइक कीजिए, शेयर कीजिए, सब्सक्राइब कीजिए और सपोर्ट करते रहिए इस चैनल को। धन्यवाद, नमस्कार। ओ व्लादिमीर का
अभी ले लीजिए, बंद नहीं हुआ है लाइव, 2 सुपर चैट है।
हाँ व्लादिमीर जी, आप सही कह रहे हो, इस्लाम को समझना ऐसा कौन सा कठिन है, कैंसर है। सही कह रहे हो क्या, पर कहना देखिए महंगा पड़ता है। व्लादिमीर जी, आपको मालूम है कि ये तुरंत हमारे चैनल पे स्ट्राइक मारेंगे, हमारे ऊपर कैसे गाज गिरती है। कुछ इनके बारे में कहो तो इस्लामोफोबिक। भाई इस्लाम से डरना बहुत जरूरी है, इनको बताना पड़ेगा हमें। अगर तुम इनसे नहीं डरेंगे, जो जेनोसाइड का खुला एजेंडा जिनका है, तो किससे डरेंगे? भूत प्रेत से नहीं, इन्हीं से डरना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि इनका खुला एजेंडा है हमारी तबाही। तो हम इस्लामोफोबिक नहीं, हम जेन्युइनली इस्लाम से भय खाते हैं, वो भयभीत है और उसका खुला ऐलान है हमारी तबाही, तो क्यों ना डरें और क्यों ना अपने बचाव की सोचें। बिल्कुल सही बात है। और ये बिल्कुल आपने सही कहा, अपनी यूनिवर्सिटीज, अरे प्राइमरी स्कूल ही सुधार लो, यूनिवर्सिटी अपने आप बन जाएंगी। आपके प्राइमरी स्कूल की, सेकेंडरी स्कूल की बदहाली है और इतना वाहियात सिस्टम है हमारा एजुकेशन सिस्टम। देयर आर मेनी अदर प्लेसेस इन द वर्ल्ड दैट हैव सच अ फाउल एजुकेशन सिस्टम। ऑल्सो देखो, जिसको ये एलीट वाले स्कूल्स भी कहते हैं, कितना प्रेशर है बच्चों पे। सुसाइड कर रहे हैं स्कूल चिल्ड्रन, 10वीं 11वीं 9वीं के बच्चे सुसाइड कर रहे हैं। ये इसको एजुकेशन कहते हैं? क्योंकि सबसे पहले एजुकेशन को देना चाहिए लाइफ स्किल्स, आपको जीने की कला। ये जीने की कला को तो छीन ही लेती है ये हमारी सारी शिक्षा की, जिसको ये शिक्षा पद्धति कह रहे हैं। और अनएम्प्लॉयबल लुम्पन यूथ तैयार कर रहे हैं हमारे स्कूल, बहुत बड़ी मात्रा में, बहुत बड़ी मात्रा में। स्कूल से ज़्यादा ये मोबाइल से लोग सीख रहे हैं। पोर्नोग्राफी के कंज्यूमर, 70 to 80% ऑफ ट्रैफिक ऑन द इंटरनेट इज फॉर डाउनलोडिंग पोर्नोग्राफी। ऐसा यूथ किस काम का आपका? यूथ डिविडेंड नहीं, यूथ लाइबिलिटी बन रही है। सो ये शिक्षा के माध्यम से भी हमने अपने यूथ को लाइबिलिटी बनाया। आई रियली फील सॉरी for the young people of this country who are being treated very badly through the formal education system. और सब इससे बहुत बेहतर चलता था जब परिवार शिक्षा देते थे। जाति व्यवस्था के तहत कम से कम गुंडे लफंगे तो नहीं पैदा होते थे। बहुत जल्दी परिवार उनको प्रोडक्टिव यूनिट बना देते थे, बहुत स्किल्स दे देते थे, जो आज स्किल्स अनस्किल्ड अनस्किलेबल यूथ हमारे स्कूल और कॉलेजेस तैयार कर रहे हैं। तो थैंक you, viewers. Well, Mr. Sibal is gone, but I thought it was important that I take on your questions since he had left before we saw your last two comments. Thank you, Ji. Shubhratri again. Please do share, like and subscribe, और इस चैनल को ग्रो करने में, इसकी रीच बढ़ाने में आपकी सहायता की अपेक्षा रखते हैं। शुभ रात्रि, नमस्कार।